on now. There we go. Okay, so a little bit just to introduce myself to you guys. My name is Jennifer LaBelle. I'm a counselor educator here at the Epilepsy Association. And my colleague, Andrea Sereda, is also a counselor educator here at the Epilepsy Association. Andrea couldn't be here today, so you've just got me. So some fast facts about me. I started at the Epilepsy Association on May 9th, so I'm still relatively new here, just like a few of you on the board. But I did do a practicum back in 2012, so I have a little bit of knowledge about the organization itself. Also, as you can tell from the photo, I have a dog named Chrissy. She's my best friend and I love her very much. Today's presentation, we're looking at about 45 minutes to an hour. That includes time for questions. But it's not formal. It's hard for me to see folks on the presentation. So if you have any questions or need anything, please just speak up and I will I'll do my best to answer anything throughout. And then one note about epilepsy, as we know, the brain is quite complex, and so information that we have changes constantly. So there might be some things that change over time. These presentations are meant to be adjustable as we get new information. What we have from the presentation came from the American Association of Neurological Nurses. So we're confident that what we do have in here is the most current and up-to-date information. But if you know differently or have any questions at all, please let me know. So a little bit about us as the Epilepsy Association. Our mission is to support people living with or impacted by epilepsy through education, support, connection, and advocacy. We are a charitable nonprofit agency that has been addressed to support the community, individual, and family needs of people living with epilepsy. And we want to see a community where all people living with epilepsy can thrive. And so, you know, what do? We provide unique services to folks in Southern Alberta with epilepsy. So there are over 30,000 people in Southern Alberta who are diagnosed with epilepsy. So that's quite a large number of folks that we're hoping to be able to support. Now we'll kind of get into what is epilepsy. Epilepsy is a condition of the central nervous system, and epilepsy causes seizures. Some facts about epilepsy. It is in fact the fourth most common neurological condition after stroke, migraine, and Alzheimer's. Epilepsy is an individual episodic condition that ranges from mild to debilitating. What we mean by that is epilepsy is a condition that affects everybody who has it differently. So one person's epilepsy is going to look different than another person's. And seizures are in fact symptoms of epilepsy. What that means is that a person who has epilepsy has a brain that is more likely to have seizures. So seizures are the symptoms of the larger condition of epilepsy. When somebody has 2 or more unprovoked seizures, they will be diagnosed with epilepsy. And unprovoked is a really interesting term or concept when we think about epilepsy. So if you see somebody have a trauma to their head and right after that trauma, they have a seizure, that's called a provoked seizure. So that wouldn't necessarily be an indicator of epilepsy. But if you see somebody have 2 seizures that don't seem to be caused by anything immediate, that could be an unprovoked seizure and could indicate a diagnosis of epilepsy. Roughly 1.5% or a little bit higher of Alberta's population has a diagnosis of epilepsy. And you can think of a seizure as an electrical storm or a discharge of electrical activity in the brain. Also, it's really interesting that anyone can develop epilepsy at any point in their lifetime. It's actually the condition where there is the most range of ages throughout the lifetime that are diagnosed with epilepsy. And then there's about 65 million people worldwide who have epilepsy. One thing, these statistics are, ever changing. They're likely higher people tend to maybe, it's tough to know the exact amount of folks with a condition of epilepsy. So what causes epilepsy? We can have genetic reasons for an epilepsy diagnosis, or anything to an infectious cause. But in fact, 60 to 75% of cases of epilepsy, there's no known cause that we can point to. So what do seizures look like? They can look like anything from a brief stare to what we think of sometimes when we think of seizures as convulsions or unusual body movements. For most people, seizures are brief and infrequent. And as I said before, a single seizure does not mean a person has epilepsy. And so now we're going to watch a video on a few folks describing what their unique seizures look like or feel like to them. I'm going to trust that folks can hear the sound, but if somebody pops on and says, "Jen, we can't hear," that would be great.
Is like my eyes are rolled back in my head. I can't see anything. I can hear you. I can't talk to you.
My seizures are a tingling in my left leg, and when it goes above my left leg, it is a full seizure, and I start shaking.
My seizures are with my eyes, and basically they roll back, and I blink all at the same time, but it only lasts like a normal blink. And so it's not really noticeable. You have to have a one-on-one conversation with me or really be looking at me to notice it. I fall to the floor, my eyes roll back, I convulse. It's not pretty.
Along with the staring episodes, I also feel very nauseated and weak.
I go unconscious and I convulse.
Basically what happens is if I'm sitting down, I would slouch over, my eyes would roll back, I'd moan, which is usually the key thing for me in seizures. If I'm standing, I would eyes roll back, same thing, but I'd fall like instantly, but I wouldn't convulse.
My seizures only happen in my sleep, but the weird part is I never really reach that deep sleep that you need to like function in the day. So like basically no matter how much sleep I get, I cannot be fully rested.
When I'm in seizure mode, I lose my vision abruptly. I lose the feeling of my left side and from my waist down. I tend to become very disoriented and very defensive, as I have no idea what's going on if I don't know who you are.
When I have a seizure, I rarely pass out. I just look like I'm going to pass out or as if I've blacked out. Sometimes I feel a bit nauseous. They last 1 to 2 minutes.
My seizures are under control, knock on wood.
So from that video, we can see that seizures and epilepsy really do look different for everybody who experiences it. And now we'll talk a little bit about parts of the brain. So I'm not going to talk about what each part of the brain does, luckily, because there are certain parts of the brain that I can't say the word for. So, but the point of this slide, and really the reason that we bring it up, is wherever a seizure happens in the brain, that's typically where we will see the effect for functioning for the person. So it is an interesting and important part of epilepsy and seizures. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what that means now. So we can have seizures that are generalized onset seizures. These are seizures that affect a person's whole brain. And we can also have seizures that are focal onset seizures. And these are seizures that happen in a specific area of the brain. There are also unknown onset seizures. So the seizure is coming from an origin that's unknown or unclear. And diving a little bit deeper into this, so generalized onset seizures, again, these are the seizures that affect their whole brain, can be broken down into two different kinds. So we could have a motor or tonic-clonic seizure, or we can have a non-motor or absence seizure. So a generalized onset seizure or a motor seizure can look like different things for different people, but these are just some of the characteristics that we tend to see in a tonic-clonic or motor seizure. So a person might vocalize and fall to the ground. There's usually a tonic phase of stiffening and the clonic phase of shaking. A person's skin could turn blue, their breathing may change, a person may drool or bite their tongue. They could lose bladder or bowel control. These typically only last between 1 to 2 minutes. When they start to last longer than that, we want to be a bit concerned and think about if this is a medical emergency for that person. Recovery from an event like this takes time. People are usually really tired after a motor seizure. And so in this video, we are going to see a person having a tonic-clonic seizure. So just to let everybody know. One thing I like to point out about this video too is to kind of pay attention to how the caregiver in the video responds.
Hun? Hun? Okay, all right. Okay. It's 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 really on your side. Okay. Okay. Just breathe. I'm here.
Yeah, so I like to point out the way that this person responds to the seizure. She puts something soft under the person's head and tries to get him onto his side. And that's kind of the indication for seizure first aid that we want to know about. And this is the other type of generalized seizure that folks can have. And again, those generalized seizures are the seizures that affect a person's entire brain. But this one is a non-motor seizure. I like to think of this as like a non-movement seizure. So typically we see this in children between the ages of 4 and 14. They only last 2 to 10 seconds. They look like daydreaming or staring off into space. People can have over 100 of these a day. They're usually not tired after this event, but they may need some help on being filled in regarding information that maybe just came up.
This girl has absence seizures, and you will see her have one while she's talking.
Because he can be as heavy as ever.
And there's a real blankness, a vacant look in the eye, and then all of a sudden they're right back with you and able to engage.
Oh, pardon?
Sorry?
Absence seizures can be mistaken for daydreaming. One of the hallmarks of absence is that the seizures happen many times in a day. Sometimes they're so fleeting, they're easy to miss. This boy is having frequent but very brief episodes. You can see his eyes flutter up. He's out of touch. Then he becomes fully aware again.
Yeah, so those are examples of the non-motor or absent seizure from 1985 or 1990, I think. So now we're going to talk about the focal onset seizures. These are the seizures that occur in one specific area of the brain. And in these seizures, we can break those down into 2 different types as well. We can have focal onset seizures with awareness and focal onset seizures with impaired awareness. So simple focal seizures, these used to be called auras, or they could be thought about as a warning for a person before they had a larger seizure. And that might be true for people. So sometimes these do happen as a precursor to a larger seizure. But what we now know is that these are seizures themselves. So simple focal seizures there is that electrical activity happening in the brain for people who are experiencing this. And these types of seizures could range from many different things. So it could be anything from a really strange sensation to a feeling of discomfort or dizziness. The key indicator for this type of seizure, though, is it would be a very clear feeling, a very overwhelming feeling. This person doesn't lose consciousness, and they can last between 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And so we're going to watch a video of a person experiencing a simple focal seizure, and we're watching the video from the perspective of the person having the seizure.
Epilepsy Society, supporting everyone affected by epilepsy. To find out more, go to www.epilepsysociety.org.uk.
Awesome. And just a note here, earlier in the presentation, I had mentioned that wherever the seizure happens, it can affect different functioning. So when we look at that example, we could assume that this is affecting their occipital lobe, or the part of the brain that's responsible for vision. We saw that they saw some flashing lights in different colors. Now we'll talk about focal onset seizures with impaired awareness. These used to be called complex partial seizures. And these seizures can look like many different things for different people, but the key feature is that the person loses awareness or loses consciousness. And they last between 1 to 2 minutes. So in this video, we're going to see some examples of what a focal onset seizure could look like for people. And just to note, everybody in the video does have epilepsy. Sorry.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Nice to see you again.
You too. See? So every 6 months we do a performance review. This is your first 6 months. How have you been liking it?
I love it here. It's been great.
Okay, good. You have nothing to worry about. Your sales numbers are higher than expected for 6 months, which is incredible. Great feedback from customers and clients. Brandon.
Look. 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 Look.
Are you okay?
Look.
Hello. Hello.
Look.
Are you okay?
Look.
Sir. You all right there, sir? Anything I can help you? Nursing, sir? All right. Is there anything I can help you with here? Communicate with me, please, sir.
Is he okay?
Look.
Why don't you come with me? Daryl? Daryl? Oh, hey. There you go. You want to come on? It's me, Molly. Sorry, come on. Let's just wander over.
Yeah.
I swear he's having a seizure. My cousin has epilepsy.
You know this man?
Before. No, I don't, but I've seen this before.
You have?
Yeah.
All right.
I think you should step back.
All right. Can we get a EMS?
Better walk it off. I think we're okay.
All right.
He'll get out of it, no worries. It should resolve itself, but do you mind if we just hang around here? Do you mind if I come to
No, that's fine. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good idea.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
All right, sir. I'm going to stay with you here. Communicate with me. Let me know when you can.
He'll be okay.
Okay?
He'll be all right.
I'm right here with you. You're going to be all right?
Brandon? You okay? You just had a seizure. It's okay. It's fine. We're gonna do this another time. Just sit there. Just relax. Okay?
So in this example, we can see that a few things to know. One is that these seizures do end. So they usually only last about 2 minutes. If it's lasting longer than 5 minutes, that is a medical emergency and 911 should be called. Often during these presentations, when people see this video, they may wonder, you know, how can you tell if this is a seizure or if somebody's using substances? And so I always like to just say that whatever the case, whatever's going on for a person, we want to make sure that they're safe and not in harm's way. But I think that the key feature of this type of a seizure is that they do end. So there's a time limit associated with the event. And if they're not ending, that's a medical emergency. And that would probably be the same no matter what is occurring for the person. That's something I want to make note of. And people who do have these types of seizures, it's really important to increase awareness for the community, just because of some of the repercussions that I'm sure you can imagine while you're watching the video, and what might happen with law enforcement or other people in the community when this event does occur. So now we kind of have a picture of what seizures look like, but how is epilepsy diagnosed when people are having seizures? And this is probably a unique process for every person who has epilepsy. Just like epilepsy itself, I'm sure everybody who is diagnosed with epilepsy has a unique story about how they came to be diagnosed with epilepsy. But first, a neurological exam would be done, where critical medical history is obtained. You would want to have blood tests. You may have brain imaging done, so MRIs or CT scans, to see if there's anything in the brain that's going on. But EEGs are really the big test that you'd want to have. EEGs need to happen while a person is actually having the seizure. We'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the presentation. But in order to see seizure activity happening in the brain, the person needs to be having a seizure while that EEG is connected. And so here we have some examples of what EEGs look like for people who are having seizures. And so you'll see here, this is an EEG of a person who does not have epilepsy. And then this is an example of a person who's having that generalized non-motor seizure, so an absence seizure. And then this is a person who's having a focal onset seizure with impaired awareness. And this is a generalized tonic-clonic seizure. So now that we know how epilepsy is diagnosed, how do we treat epilepsy? So epilepsy's first kind of course of treatment would be medication. So anti-seizure medication is really important for people, but medication does have its side effects that can be really challenging for people. So we can have anything from fatigue to depression. Next, surgery could be an option for people. The area of the brain that the seizures are happening in needs to be very specific, and it can't affect motor functioning. If that's the case, then a person may have brain surgery to remove the area of the brain that the seizures are occurring in. No matter what the course of treatment is, there are add-on therapies that are important for anybody with epilepsy, including exercise, sleep hygiene, different types of diets, and stress management. So we know that sleep and stress seem to be two really big triggers for people who have epilepsy. If somebody is taking medications and they've tried to, and they've done those course of treatments, and the medication does not seem to be having the desired effect that a person would like for controlling seizures, doctors may talk to folks about vagus nerve stimulation, or a VNS. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but it is an implant that stimulates our vagus nerve. The ketogenic diet has been shown to be really helpful for children with epilepsy, but for adults, it's a bit trickier. It's harder to maintain that type of a diet, especially the rigid form of keto that we would need to for seizure control. And then there's also deep brain stimulation, and that is what it sounds like. Your parts of your brain would be stimulated by a doctor. But 30% of people living with epilepsy are not able to gain full seizure control through any form of treatment. We also have rescue treatment. So we chatted a little bit about how if a seizure lasts longer than 3 to 5 minutes, we're starting to get concerned that that is a medical emergency. And in that case, if somebody's having a seizure that's lasting longer than that time, and they're getting into that zone of emergency, we can offer now a sublingual medication, Ativan, that goes into their cheek, and that calms the central nervous system and can help that person come out of that seizure. There's also intranasal midazolam, and that is not a needle going in a baby's nose. It is a spray. We saw that happening to the little simulation babies at the sim lab, and I thought it was a needle, and I was like, that's hard. It is just a spray. But it does go into a person's nose, and that is faster acting than the dissolving Ativan. Vagus nerve stimulator can also be used as a rescue medication, which is super interesting. So this is what a VNS looks like. It's an implant, kind of like a pacemaker, and the cord goes up into the person's neck, just below the jawline, so nothing actually goes into the brain. This is what that scar looks like. And a person would wear a watch, and the way that this is used as a rescue medication or a rescue therapy is that this watch, the watch is swiped over the VNS, and that would send extra stimulation to the vagus nerve, and the hope would be that that could support a person to come out of their seizure. Now we're going to talk about some difficult topics. So refractory epilepsy is also called drug-resistant epilepsy. So earlier I'd said that 30% of people don't gain seizure control with those therapies. That doesn't necessarily mean that their epilepsy is refractory. Refractory epilepsy is a type of epilepsy that severely interferes with a person's quality of life. There are certain people who may never gain seizure control fully with medication, but they know when their seizures are going to happen, and they're kind of able to process, like it's something they can prepare for. But then there are other people who are having many seizures and can't gain control of that through medication or therapies, and we call that refractory epilepsy. PNES, or psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, are events that resemble epileptic seizures, but when connected to an EEG, there's no electrical activity happening for a person in their brain. These can also be called functional seizures, and it is considered a functional neurological condition. So this can be treated through SSRIs, through CBT counseling, or trauma work. One thing I do like to note about PNES is a lot of people with PNES suffer with some discrimination or stigma. And so I always want to make it clear that the person who has PNES or is experiencing these types of seizures, they're not making that seizure up. They're not pretending to have a seizure. In the same way that sometimes if I'm nervous, I blush, or I may feel, you know, an upset stomach or have like a physiological response to a psychological stimulus. This is what people who have PNES experience. So a psychological stimulus can trigger one of these seizures, but it is treatable as you kind of calm the nervous system and work through those triggers that affect you. And then there's SUDEP, or sudden unexpected death, and this affects 1 in 1,000 people per year. And it seems that the people most at risk of SUDEP are young adults who have refractory epilepsy and tonic-clonic seizures specifically. So some seizure first aid to be aware of. We want to make sure we time the seizure. So that's one of the more important parts. If you happen to see a seizure and you're not able to put your timer on right away, that's okay. But keeping track of how long it's lasting, because after that 5-minute mark, we definitely want to be calling 911. Another piece that I think is really important is to stay with the person until they're fully alert again. And this is because having 2 seizures back to back is also a medical emergency. So we'd want to make sure that they have some medical attention. We want to make sure that we guide people away from dangerous situations. So in a seizure, one of the more dangerous parts of that for a person is actually their physical surroundings. So hitting their head or, things like that. The person's not aware of their actions. So, you want to try to keep yourself safe as much as you're keeping them safe. We never want to restrain a person. This can hurt them and it can hurt you. And we don't want to put things in people's mouths. Not ever. When do we want to seek medical attention? If the person's pregnant, injured, or has diabetes, we want to call 911. Second seizure without recovery, it goes over 5 minutes. If you're in a public situation and you don't know if a person has epilepsy and they have no medical ID, if you look at their phone and there's no medical identification on their lock screen, there's nothing kind of clear indicating that this person has epilepsy, you'll want to call 911. If somebody's having a seizure due to diabetes or other reasons, that is a medical emergency. If the person's in prolonged pain or has a severe headache, or if it occurs in water, we want to call 911. As I'm sure you can all imagine, there are impacts to everyday life for people. So fatigue and cognitive issues are 2 things that folks with epilepsy may experience. We also have things like social isolation, low self-esteem, depression, and anxiety. This is especially prevalent for people who are first diagnosed with epilepsy. And so I always like to think about the Epilepsy Association being really important for these 4 areas of a person's life. So we really want to help support people to find their community, and then to work through some of the challenges and the anxiety surrounding epilepsy. Something that can be really helpful for people with these impacts to daily living is a seizure action plan. Something that people talk about is the lack of autonomy or control they might feel they have during a seizure. Seizure action plans can be really helpful to get everybody in your life on the same page. This could be your employer, school, friends, family, just important people that you're going to be around, so that, when you're having a seizure, you can know that those around you know how to handle it. So what do we do at the Epilepsy Association? So we have curriculum-based programs like Uplift, Paces, and Hopscotch. Uplift is a program for folks who are maybe struggling a little bit with some anxiety and depression surrounding their epilepsy diagnosis. So we go through cognitive behavioral tips and tricks, as well as mindfulness and meditation. Paces is a program for people who are recently diagnosed with epilepsy and are kind of like, now what do I do? And Hopscotch works with people one-on-one to support them with their memory and cognitive functioning, or anything that they're struggling with in regard to memory. We also do education, so like this presentation, and we can do this presentation for anyone in the community really, but schools, families, individuals, companies, anyone who's interested in learning more. And then we also offer support. So we have support groups. We just started a program called Peer-to-Peer. We offer advocacy to folks, and then we can do some short-term counseling, and we can provide referrals to different services that people might need. And then we do other things as well. So we have volunteering programs. There's a monthly newsletter called Brain Buzz. Camp Fireworks is really fun. There's Purple Day. We have monthly webinars, and we do partnership with Kids Up Front. So we can offer folks tickets to fun events in the city. So yeah, that's it. This is my contact information and Andrea's contact information. So love to hear from you guys about anything you might have questions about, but I will go ahead and stop recording and stop sharing. Nope, I don't want to end.